Welcome, everyone. This is the latest edition of ConversingLabs, which is ReversingLabs' bi-weekly podcast where we talk about threats, threat hunting, threats to software supply chain, and all manner of interesting topics like that. I'm your host, Paul Roberts. I'm the cyber content lead here at ReversingLabs. I'm very pleased this week to have one of my colleagues, Karlo Zanki, who is a reverse engineer at ReversingLabs with us. Hey, welcome, Karlo.
Thank you, Paul. I'm glad to be here also.
It's great to have you. You have been the author of a number of really interesting research reports for ReversingLabs in your time here, and you do a lot of really fascinating work. And we're going to talk about some of it this week regarding dependency confusion attacks, which is a very interesting area of investigation. Just a little bit of housekeeping before I get going for our attendees. We are going to take questions at the end of our conversation with Karlo. So if you've got them, just we're on Zoom webinars, just use the Q&A feature to pose your questions. There is a chat feature. I'm going to share some links to some of the writing that we've done on NPM related threats and attacks in the chat, and feel free to communicate to me or the other hosts or other attendees. Following the conversation today, we're going to just have a couple questions for you about potentially interested in some follow-up webinars or discussions around dependency confusion attacks. You'll also have the option to get a ConversingLabs t-shirt, the rare ConversingLabs t-shirt. So hang around to the end if you want to score a t-shirt. Karlo, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hey, could you tell us just a little bit about the work that you do here at ReversingLabs?
Well, here at ReversingLabs, I'm mainly responsible for research and finding interesting stories for presentation of our my everyday job is looking at potential malware and trying to find something dangerous in software world.
So today we're talking about some really interesting discoveries that you had just in the last couple of weeks regarding dependency confusion attacks or threats on the NPM platform, which is a kind of open source platform. Could you talk just a little bit about what dependency confusion is and how dependency confusion attacks work before we delve into what you specifically discovered?
Well, dependency confusion is a type of attack where the attacker doesn't directly try to penetrate your infrastructure. Instead, they try to circumvent your defenses by making your build environment or one of your developers install the malicious payload on your system without direct interaction. So we aren't talking about phishing emails or something like that, where they're trying to alert you to install something by clicking on it. Instead, this is a bit more complex attack where the attacker tries to find one of your weak spots and make your misconfiguration do the job instead of him. So basically, he relies on you having private dependencies, that your source code depends on private packages, and that such packages don't exist in public NPM repository, IP, anything, whatever. And
doesn't have to be NPM, right?
It can be a public package repository, as long as it has, most of them have, let's say, are vulnerable to dependency confusion attacks, because that's just, let's say, a feature, not a vulnerability, as they would say. They provide you with an option to configure your system so that it isn't vulnerable, but if by default, it is. If you miss the proper configuration steps, you will end up with a vulnerable development environment.
Right.
So they rely on you having a private dependency package inside your build environment infrastructure, and that package isn't listed in public NPM repo. What they do then, they publish their own malicious package to the public repository, name it the same as your package is named in your private repository, and give it a higher version number in hope that procedures in your build environment will fetch the package from the public repository which has higher version number, suggesting that it's a newer and that it's your goal to install a newer version of your package.
Right. So applications these days might use a variety of both public open source modules and internal private, non-public, privately developed modules. And they all kind of come together. And these attacks seem to play on, where that package, where a module is sourced from, and exploit some configuration weaknesses in these platforms, NPM or PyFire or GitHub or whatever, where they might just preference the higher version number over whether something is public, a public package or a private package.
Yes.
And we've seen there was some really interesting, pretty extensive research done about a year ago that revealed this as an avenue to attack some really sophisticated companies, Apple, Tesla, and others who were vulnerable to this, right? Who found that you could push malicious code into these environments using these dependency confusion strategies. How common is it, Karlo, that folks who might be using a platform like NPM or GitHub or what have you would have it misconfigured or set up in such a way that, again, public package with the higher version number, but the same name as a private internally developed package might get loaded?
Well, as general vulnerabilities in any software system, always puts misconfiguration very high in top 10 vulnerability reasons in their vulnerability list. So it's common in any kind of development, so also in development based on public source repositories. So again, it is a lot of people, a lot of developers of any kind forget to do proper configuration. Either they don't know how to do it, either they configure it well on 2 or 3 systems and just in one place they forget it. So as soon as you have to do some configuration, and by default the configuration is not protecting you, there is a high probability that some % of people will remain vulnerable.
Let's talk about the let's move the story up to the end of April. I think April 29th, the company Snyk, just in cybersecurity company, published some research saying that they had discovered some targeted dependency confusion attacks. Didn't name the firm that it was associated with, but these were sort of in the wild, what appeared to be dependency confusion attack on the NPM platform. Talk about what Snyk uncovered and then kind of how you engage with that.
Well, the Snyk detected a dependency confusion attack. They did a detailed analysis, and just let me first say, today every day you can see a lot of NPM packages trying to create a proof of concept for dependency confusion, but most of them don't have real malware, fully functional malware inside them. They just perform beaconing or something like that. what was interesting to Snyk was that they found a package that contained a fully functional malware. So it would get installed. It performed all kinds of malicious operations. It included reverse shells. So it's a fully functional malware. And what was more interesting was that it was well obfuscated and also included encryption of the final payload. So that triggered some interest in them. They did a good write-up about it, found public the obfuscator for it, and pretty much did the whole analysis. What was interesting that these packages were published 12th of April. They reported them around end of April. In the meantime, till today, there were several other packages of the same format with the same content published to the NPM repositories, targeting other companies, which we can detect based on username of the NPM publisher of the packages.
Right.
So they were targeting, all the names were targeting German companies, which was interesting.
So you said that this is going on a lot, like if you were to just monitor or scan all the activity on NPM in a given week or whatever, you would see a lot of these types of precursors to what look like dependency confusion attacks, but that a lot of them might be the work of people like you. They might be the work of security researchers or security companies kind of testing things out, right? Or who knows what, non-malicious kind of attacks. Hard to know what's behind them. Could be malicious, could not be malicious, but they're not, it's not malware per se. Yeah.
In this case, we had a fully functional malware.
Yeah.
That's what was interesting.
Right.
So, and all these packages were from the same actor, obviously. The actor did a lot of work to remain anonymous. All the accounts were created with Proton Mail, mail provider, which means that they didn't want to know who was behind this stuff.
Right.
So it all looks like a genuine malware.
And in terms of like what was in, so when you're looking at a dependency confusion attack, like one thing you noted was there's a module, there's one of these NPM packages that has a legitimate name, appears to be the name of a internally developed module, non-public module. We don't know where it's from. We don't know who developed it. We don't know where it's used, but looks like a legitimate name. And then these two other packages that were linked to that were clearly sort of gibberish, nonsense names, packages. When you go to analyze those, Karlo, what are you looking for when you find stuff like that?
Well, generally, the most important thing is that you finally want to know is what malware is capable of and what is the command server to which it phones back. So that's generally what you look. But what's always interesting is new techniques in malware obfuscation. I don't know anything bypassing. So something that differs it from other malware you have previously seen. And of course, you want to find out who is behind it. Is it somehow connected to some well-known actor from before or anything? In this case, none of research. Snyk did a research, JFrog did a research, we did a research. None of us could have pinpointed the actor behind this. That was quite interesting.
Right, because all you have to go on is really these, maintainer accounts at NPM or GitHub.
Yes.
They're associated with an email address, but it's a kind of straw man email address, a Proton mail address, or So, and that's kind of the end of the line in terms of what you have as a trail leading to the attacker. What just looking at the packages themselves, like what are some of the like if you're on the target side, the defender side, what are there red flags? Are there things that you should be looking for if you're concerned about, an attack like this on your own organization?
first thing you wish to look is look at our version numbers. Let's say you have a private package number, you usually put number versions in sequential order 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, and if you suddenly hit large discrepancy in your version order, you can find that pretty unexpected. But again, that would require you to look at the dependency you have installed in your software, which if you have a lot of dependencies in your software, it's not an easy task. If you have 2 or 3 dependencies, it's not hard to track. But if you have a bit more complex software, which has tens of dependencies, we don't need to talk about hundreds. It's even enough that you have 10, 20 dependencies. It's hard to follow track about those version numbers. Usually human brain can put 7, 8 things in the context, and more of that, something gets out of the brain. So you want to look at high version numbers, and also you want, again, if you get infected, you want to monitor network activities and typical malware detection stuff.
Right. So Snyk discovered these 3 packages. They wrote it up in a blog post end of April. What was the process you used to go from the work that they did to discovering additional packages, related packages on NPM with some different contents and functionality in them?
Well, actually, I did my everyday job and looked for malicious packages. And when I found the package, I tried to find more about the encryption news, about some constants seen in the code. And then, of course, the first Google search result was Snyk's blog. So
right. You said, okay.
When you find something interesting, you usually try to get more information about that sample to see if it was already found or anything like that.
Right. And we know from so we're talking about these in the context of targeting German firms, and we're saying that because, first of all, in the Snyk blog post, there was one of the maintainer accounts, I think was Bosch
Bosch
NPM modules or something like that. So there was this Bosch, obviously big German electronics firm.
Yeah, but when you have just one maintainer, it's not easy to understand that it's targeting the real Bosch.
It's a big leap to sort of say this must be targeting Bosch, right?
But in this case, we had 3 more packages, which also contain different names of prominent German companies. And from that, we could conclude that targets were German companies of all types.
Right, and one of them was Bertelsmann NPM was one of the accounts. There was the Bosch node modules. There was another one, DB Schenker, which is a rail and logistics company in Germany as well. So putting that all together, to you and to most of us, looks like, okay, this seems to be a targeted attack against German firms, and your mind kind of goes from there. Okay, well, who might want to target German firms and so on. But the basis for that, again, is the maintainer names, the module names, and typo squatting, or this kind of confusion is a part of dependency confusion attacks, right? So when we talk about typo squatting, that's often used in like phishing attacks or watering hole attacks. You set up a domain to sort of look like another domain and then lure people to it and hope that they don't notice that it's different. How does typo squatting work in the context of like dependency confusion attacks? Is it a really important component of it or not?
Well, I wouldn't name it typo squatting, since in most cases the name of the package needs to be the same as the private package.
Right.
But typo squatting is also quite often seen in public repositories because there are more vectors for performing typo squatting.
Right.
Traditional one letter change is one of type, but you have in NPM, for example, you have scopes, monkey, some other name. And what you can do is take a basic package name and extend it or remove scope from it to perform typo squatting. So you have more vectors, more possibilities to perform typo squatting in public repositories than in some other traditional typo squatting landscapes.
Right. But you make a really good point, which is for dependency confusion to work, the attack module, so to speak, the public attack module has to actually have the exact same name as the private module. So that would seem to be like, if you were worried about this as a development organization, one thing it seems like you should be doing is scanning like NPM or GitHub for modules that have the same name as the private modules that you maintain, right?
Yes, that's one way to find them. But also what you can do to protect yourself is to use NPM scopes and to reserve your scope on NPM so someone else couldn't use that against you.
Right. How is it that private, modules that you develop internally become known publicly, right? Like, how does that happen? And what mistakes do development organizations make?
Well, it can happen, for example, accidentally. You have some build script which publish online to the public Git repo, and mistakenly it puts something that wasn't defined in a GitHub ignore file or something like that. When you perform publish in NPM, you automatically publish something to some repo that you configured, and if you didn't configure it to be private, it can get again somewhere. There are a lot of ways.
Is there an easy way to search for that? Is there an easy way to scan for that? Like, have we, here, we got a list of private modules, we know their names. Let's go ahead and just scan all these different repos and look for any reference to them.
Yeah, the research from 2021 did just that. Search for public, for private names in public repos. So there are several ways to do this.
Yeah. So bad guys could do it if they know the name, but of course, as a developer, as a good guy, right, or a potential target, something you could do.
Perform that, yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Talk about from like the attack standpoint. I mean, we talk about dependency confusion, but this is really just a way to place malware in target environments at the end of the day, right? So could you just talk about the kind of connect the dots between these malicious NPM modules, like the ones that we saw, and so those get loaded maybe by mistake, how you move from that to actually getting the malicious binaries onto the target environment? How does that process work?
Well, once you have it in public NPM repository, I'm not sure if I understood the question totally, but once you publish your malicious code up to the repository, you don't need to do anything personally, directly. It's all now on the target and their build environment. If their build environment is configured to, let's say, a daily update dependency, they will do it instead of you. You don't have to perform any further action. You don't have to send phishing emails, anything like that. Your biggest work is in preparation, finding good target, prepare good package with a good version, and you don't even have to try too hard to keep it hidden, because since this stuff is done automatically in background from the node engine or your build environment, the developer often doesn't see that the dependencies got updated.
Right. And at that point, really, it's just a malware infection, right? At that point, you're really talking about malware. Right.
You probably have, when that JavaScript is run in Node module, Node provides post-install scripts, which enable that after installation is finished, you launch some Node script which you have in the package. So once you specified it to launch after the installation, it's up. If you configure it properly to beacon back to you, probably through DNS or anything that can go out through several layers of protection, you know that you have a reverse shell. Now it's up to you what you want to do next. You can put anything other on it.
And your analysis found that these modules had, kind of the full range of capabilities that a malicious downloader would have.
Yes, as download packages, upload information, execute reverse shell with several commands. So
Right.
everything. The Sneak blog did also a good technical description of the malware itself. So it's definitely a good read.
Okay, so we published and JFrog published and Sneak published these blog posts saying like, NPM dependency confusion attacks are being used to attack German organizations. And then within like the last 12 hours, we got a tweet from this German company that I wasn't familiar with, but maybe other people were. Code White Security. Saying, thanks so much for your great research. Basically, this is a red team attack that we have been doing on behalf of our clients. And you discovered it. And, good job. Let's see. What should we think about this? So lo and behold, yes, there was an attack on German firms. We were right about that. No, it was not malicious per se. It was part of a planned kind of red team assessment of their security. Good, I guess, that Bertelsmann and Bosch and these other companies are looking at this as a avenue of attack. What do we make of this, Karlo? And what should we conclude?
Well, personally, my opinion is that, okay, you're a red teamer. You want to do something, to prove something that the something is vulnerable. But usually it's not so common to put a fully functional malware as a payload for your red team tool. Because in this case, anyone can copy that repository that were public. Some of them still haven't been removed from NPM. So any malicious actor can copy that fully functional malware, modify it on its own account, and use it again on something else. It's what's specific about that public repositories. You can always create another account, publish another software. Most of that software doesn't go through some detailed code review, which prevents you from publishing. Security works in a way that someone reports a malware and then they remove it. So in this case, when somebody puts a red tool up, which is fully functional malware, anybody else can also download it, redo it, rework it, and publish it for his own purposes. Right. So
this is all kind of happening in the open, basically,
yes.
in public.
One thing is when you put red team tools in a closed environment of the company you are pen testing. But when you publish it fully functional to public repository, you need to be aware that someone else can detect it and use it for his really bad purposes.
Right.
So that's why most of the red team testing tools on NPM are usually just beacons.
Right. One thing I thought is, listen, companies that are hired to do red teaming, like their job is to get into your environment, right? Like that's what you're paying them to do. And so they're going to stay on top of whatever the latest and best means for compromising organizations are. The fact that this company used NPM dependency confusion is an indication that the word is out, basically, that this is a very reliable means to penetrate even sophisticated organizations. White hat companies doing red team assessments are using it, but by extension we should also assume that the bad guys are doing this as well.
It's also positive from this case is that it definitely has risen the awareness of the problem. It will probably spread some news among companies, and that's a good thing about it. But there are, sometimes it's good to make some publicity, and sometimes it also, there's always good and bad. Everybody,
as the saying goes, there's no such thing as bad publicity. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
Some people may say could take issue with that. But so I guess the question is, so if you're an organization that an enterprise, you're doing software development, you're obviously consuming open source and third-party code from different platforms, GitHub, NPM, what have you. You made a lot of investments in kind of traditional security detection and monitoring tools, IDS, IPS, endpoint, maybe you've got some cloud-based stuff as well. Where does this, so this is a new kind of attack vector that you may not be aware of or have been aware of, but clearly it's one that's being used. What can you really do from a monitoring and detection standpoint to stay on top of this and to feel confident that somebody tries a dependency confusion attack against my organization, we're either insulated from it, we're not vulnerable, or we're going to detect it, when it happens? What would you recommend? Because there aren't really like security tools that do just this, that look just for this type of thing.
Yes, definitely. What you should do is, like always, use all the best recommendation for security, because that are the places you can always catch it when it tries to get outside, if it's not doing just wiping. So you need to keep all you can't put back the traditional methods. But what you need to do is, if you use any kind of public source code repository and you have a private network, you need to let's say do monitoring of the communication with the outside public repositories, either through some middle protected controlled by yourself mirror of such public repositories, which you then do some analysis of anything that gets into it and stay down. And you also need to monitor, let's say, create a process of validating configurations. Whenever anybody, you need to define good procedure about proper configuration of your development environment, because as stated by OWASP, this configuration is still one of top problems and top vulnerabilities in any kind of software solution. So you need to do configuration properly. There are a lot of public documents explaining how it is properly done. You need to do that properly. There are also tools which can help you track dependencies and such stuff. You can also use them. It's never a bad thing.
We have getting ready to wrap up. I think we are going to be doing questions and answers. So if you have a question for Karlo about anything we've talked about, use a Q&A feature to ask your question, and Karlo and I will get to it. Karlo, final question is, if you're concerned that an attack like this may have taken place, what can you do to sort of retrace the steps here and piece together something like a dependency confusion attack after the fact to figure out whether you've been targeted or victimized? Like, are there what would be the steps that you would use to try and like reconstruct an attack and figure out what happened? Is it pretty straightforward, just kind of looking at
First thing you need to analyze is your dependencies. You need to see what do you use from outside repositories. You can do that by analyzing your code. You don't need to perform any further action but code analysis. You need to look at the places where your dependencies have been declared and see what you have installed. That's the most important thing. And then you can see if that is really what came from your private repository. If you see some, let's say, anomalies like big version numbers, unexpected package names, then that's a sign that you could potentially be compromised.
And then if there is a compromise to take place, obviously you can see from the sneak write-up or from our write-up or JFrog, often there are indicators of compromise, command and control servers that are used,
Yes,
and what
but
have you that you would
the
look for.
biggest thing which will catch your name is probably the version numbers. Someone can modify this code, put another package name. Someone can change command and control server encryption keys, anything like that. That can be changed. But what is, if he's targeting you with dependency confusion attack, then they are targeting your dependencies from your priority policies. So that's the place that you wish to check and see if that if public package exists on NPM. It's not hard.
Okay, final question. And again, if people have questions, ask them because we're about to wrap it up. Final question. Are the platform vendors themselves, NPM, GitHub, etc., are they engaging with this issue or this problem at all in terms of features or kind of tightening up their business logic to address these attacks, or are they sort of like, this is the way it's supposed to work?
Well, my opinion is that they're handling it like this is what we wish it to work. You make sure you configure it well, and you will be safe. So
don't be dumb.
Yes, read the manual or something like that.
That's RTFM. Yeah. Got it. Okay, we have one question from the audience, and Carolyn is here to read. Hey, Carolyn, how you doing?
Hi, everybody. Hi, nice to see you all. My name is Carolyn Van Arsdale. I'm a cyber content creator here at ReversingLabs. I'm so happy to be here. We have one question for you, Karlo. You ready?
Yes.
So this one question we've got for you is, what data source could help defenders detect such attacks? Question from the audience.
Yeah, there is no central source of data. A lot of companies are doing a lot of research on public repositories in the recent time. That's where software supply chain attacks are becoming really popular in the last year and a half. A lot of companies are tackling this problem, doing their own research. There's no centralized like NVD for vulnerabilities. There's no central place where you can find such information. What I personally do, I follow a few Twitter accounts which have proven to give most information. You can always watch for some cyber news, because usually in cyber news, somebody publishes when, even though that company isn't behind research, this information is usually reshared. But the fastest you will know on Twitter, security professionals like Twitter a lot. You will find it on Twitter probably before some bigger article is written. So follow some interesting people on Twitter, and that's probably the best source of information.
Okay, maybe we can share some of those accounts too in a follow-up session. Okay, I'm gonna launch the poll, and then I got one more question for you, Karlo. So we got a few questions just for the audience. First of all, are you interested in learning more? So if you want to go into a deeper dive on dependency confusion attacks, doesn't have to be NPM. Let us know. We've got experts like Karlo who are available to tell you more. Karlo, one of the things we've seen, in fact, there was just a tweet about it recently also, is kind of folks kind of taking over domains associated with different code repositories, and sort of that there is this kind of ecosystem that is vulnerable to abuse or misuse around open source code and code maintainers and so on. What is there anything really that organizations or companies can do about that risk of just again, somebody takes over a domain associated with some big commonly used software module or component, somebody got a single maintainer module that somebody takes over and starts putting backdoors in or stuff like that. I mean, we've seen that happen frequently as well. Any easy way to guard against that?
Well, I'm not sure if there is an easy way. Things were designed to work in that way. You should, let's say, you should be responsible for your domain probably. You should take care that it stays yours. You should protect your secrets in some other cases if you want to protect your account. Nobody will do that instead of you probably. There could possibly be some two-factor authentications or anything like that that we previously seen on protecting your personal email accounts, something like that. That would probably solve some of the problems, but until that's implemented, it's probably your responsibility to do that on your own.
It is something that we're really starting to address right now, which is a lot of this open source ecosystem is really based on trust, right? And
yes,
trust between the different participants, and that is obviously vulnerable to misuse and abuse. Okay, final question, folks, is the big one, which is, are you interested in the ConversingLabs t-shirt? So if you are, we've just let us know, and we will follow up with an email, get your address, and send you one of the exclusive ConversingLabs t-shirts. I wanted to, Karlo, anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to say or point you wanted to make, I didn't give you a chance to make?
No. Thank you. It was a really nice conversation.
Great conversation. Yeah, I agree. Karlo, Zanki, thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us on ConversingLabs. And we'll have you on again. I'm sure you're working on interesting stuff all the time. So it'd be really great to have you back to talk about it. And thanks to Carolyn. Thanks once again for your help. And thanks to all of our attendees once again. We'll have another one of these coming up in a couple of weeks. We're going to do some live stuff from the RSA conference beginning of June. So stay tuned. Karlo, have a great day, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks to everybody who followed up to the end. Nice from you. Hope it wasn't boring.
No, I don't think it was. All right, man. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.